let's get started with tonight. Here's what we're doing tonight. I'm going to call out a couple of people as soon as I see you on the screen here. I've got some people like Sumac. I got to talk to you tomorrow. Yeah, look at the look in your face. Yeah, no. I don't mean it in a bad way. I don't mean being called out in a bad way. But I got some questions that have popped up from students, and I want to kind of go over them so that everybody can kind of get a feel for how to handle certain things. One of the it's actually the top 10 questions, but I think I only have 7 of them right now. But let me just tell you, one of them I just came up with because one of my students just called me. And the issue was, just so everybody understands, the issue is this, that, we have Jim Richardson, who's helping us out with Stonebridge Consulting, where he is actually acting as a consultant to help you raise private money, to build your pitch deck, to give you the whole face forward in order to go out there to speak to investors to raise private money. Then we had Jillian on last week, where Jillian was talking about the issue of commissions and how you get yourself into trouble. There's one guru out there who's actually getting himself into trouble by trying to provide a commission for people that raise private money for him. And then this particular student came up with a question of, hey, wait a minute, isn't that what Jim Richardson's doing? Isn't Jim Richardson violating the rule that Jillian was talking about? And the answer is no. As a matter of fact, Jillian is Jim Richardson's securities attorney as well. So the difference is in the word commission. Commission tends to imply that it's based upon a percentage of money raised. Jim doesn't work that way. Jim is a flat fee consultant for his services. So that is the difference between the two, and that is why you're not going to see Jim doing any time anytime soon. All right, so let me get started on these questions. Let me know when you all can see that. David Harrell, Jim O'Connor, Jeff Kelly, thank you. All right, that's the top 6 student questions of the week. I guess I only had 6. I thought I had 10, but I gave you a bonus one right there with Jillian's. All right, so let me kind of run through these. Some of you may recognize these questions as being your own. Others will think, geez, this is stuff we've handled before, but some of it requires repeating, which is totally fine. So let's go with number 1. The first question is how to structure seller financing. Now, this is listen, we talk about this, and the reason why this particular question is coming up right now is because I have 2 students who are involved in deals where seller financing is now looking as though it's the way to go. And I got to tell you, I'm going to tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly, as usual, as to how these students are doing it right and how they're doing it wrong. So let me kind of run through exactly how you go about this. So the first thing is, if you're looking for any form of seller financing, putting it in the letter of intent that's where you should be asking for it initially. Now, here's the situation with one of these students. One of these students has gotten down to the final wire, and he's at the brink where it's either he's going to pull it or he's going to move forward. But the only way he's moving forward, because after what he's gone through, he realizes that he can't get bank debt. And the seller likes him and really wants to work with him and wants to get this deal to happen. So the seller has come along and said, hey, why don't we do seller financing? Why don't I be the bank for you? Okay, so that's great and that's fine. The student didn't start out that way, but he hung in the deal and he kept it going. And by the time he's now about to cross another threshold in this process, the seller has now offered seller financing. So now we've got to go back and we've got to amend the purchase and sale agreement to include terms the way that he wants it. Now, that's one student. I have another student who is, I'm not going to, he's probably on the call right now. He kind of came to the owner forum a little late in the game. And he is, he hasn't been indoctrinated, so to speak, like many of you have, where, I tell you the number 1 rule is always remain in control of the deal. So he's got this deal, and the seller is a pretty seasoned seller. He knows the game, and he's dictating that they're going to use my purchase and sale contract, and we're going to do it this way. And then the guy submitted a note. Gosh, what the heck was the name of that note? It's I guess it's pretty unique to Ohio, but it's in my opinion, it's a rather punitive note, in that, I mean, if it essentially you have to give up the right to, if you miss a payment, they can just call the note. No judicial process whatsoever. They get the property back. So cognivito, something like that. I can't quite recall the name of it, but it's a pretty onerous note. I wouldn't sign it, but the student is wanting to get this deal done, is willing to do that. So those are the two scenarios of seller financing that I've just came upon. As a matter of fact, today for both of these. So if you don't put it in the letter of intent, it doesn't mean you can't get it later on. It's just a lot harder. So always remember that. Now, and this, I said, this is how one guy had his deal work. Now, as you know, I always say, and this is, both of these students are fighting me on this. And listen, you can do whatever you want. You're all big boys and girls. But as I always say, never, never, never sign personally. Sign in the name of your entity. Always sandwich your signature. And I've actually had a lesson on this. If you go back in the archives many, many moons ago, I actually had a lesson on how to sign your name so that you don't get sued personally. And what you need to do is sandwich your signature between the name of your entity and the title, your title within that entity. And that lets the world know that you are not signing personally, you are signing as an officer of that entity. And then everyone knows that's not a personal signature. Doesn't mean that if there's wording within that contract and that you're signing about it being personal, they're having a personal guarantee that they can't come back at you. What I'm saying is, if there is no personal guarantee inside that contract, but you sign it as yourself, that could be construed as a personal contract, and they could come after you personally. Don't do it. All right. So never, never, never sign personally. And see, the problem is that these two students want to get these deals done, and they're okay. They're okay with, hey, everything's gonna be fine. Everything's all, so as we say in law school, it's never a problem until it's a problem. So, you can do whatever you want. My advice to you is just to never, ever, never, ever put yourself in a position where they can come after your personal home. Okay, that's the fear, folks. I've lived under that fear. Not an easy way to sleep. So just don't do it. Next thing is, always make sure the seller's mortgage is a first position lien. Okay, if you take out if the seller's providing the financing, like one of these students, the seller's going to be the bank. Well, if the seller's going to be the bank, there better not be a bank behind him. In other words, he better own that property free and clear, and that your mortgage is in first position so that nobody else can come in behind you and take it away. All right. Now, let me just check out the chat. So, may I ask you, Brian?
Thanks. And hey, Charlie, I don't know if I'm one of these examples, but quick question on the signed personally piece.
Yes.
In this particular deal that I'm working on,
You mean the one that we're talking about right now?
Is that the one? Yeah, great. Thanks. Real nice.
One of them.
Can I have a discount this month since you're using me?
No. Yeah, sure.
Great. Thanks.
Okay.
Hey, so look, in a seller finance deal that I'm working on currently, the owner says that he would only do a recourse loan, right? If he's going to finance this, right? He's going to take the note. Is there a way, to give him what he wants? Give him some kind of recourse, but padding this in an LLC like you just talked about. Well, so maybe he has some recourse against the LLC, but not against my home.
Okay, that is absolutely, you can do that. You can do a limited recourse. You can do a limited personal guarantee. You can definitely write it. But the thing is, when we talk about recourse, we talk about personal recourse typically. Now, if this guy has been telling you that he's going to do personal recourse, or he's going to do recourse, in my mind, he's saying personal recourse. I want your house. I want your house. Now, if you can draft that guarantee and the note document, the security document, that's a mortgage, security document. If you can draft that document in such a way that it doesn't touch you personally, go ahead, go for it. That's not signing personally.
Got it. Okay. I just don't see why somebody would offer seller financing. And in this case, talking with the broker and talking to the guy, he wants, I don't know why he would offer seller financing if it wasn't a recourse loan. Who in their right mind would do that? Okay,
because you're obviously he's on the seller side, so he wants as much. Now, here's the thing about this, and is that the reason why he's offering the seller recourse is because the deal's not going to get done by a bank,
right?
Which means it's a riskier deal,
right?
Which means now he wants your personal home to back up his riskier deal, and I say no. But I know that you got some other things in there that benefit you as a result of that. So
I understand.
Yeah, so that's my concern is that it just is riskier. It all involves a risk. I'm very risk averse. And especially when I want you to all keep a fine, not even a fine line, a broad line between business and personal. We're all trying to start a business for you here, the multifamily business, but you keep your home and everything else separate from what we're doing. So that's the way I look at it. So, but Brian, you still there?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's I'll wait to see what these guys come back with. I know I'm drafting that amendment for you tomorrow. So we'll see what these guys say. Fingers crossed.
Yep.
So, all right, man. Thanks. Good question. It's a great question. All right, so let's get back to always make the seller in a first lien position. You always want because remember here, folks, especially if you're using other people's money to buy the property, the seller's probably going to want a down payment, 20%. So your investors are going to come along and put 20% down. If you are in that situation, you would better make sure that mortgage that you have is in a first position, because you don't want to be in a second position. The property gets foreclosed on because he didn't pay the first mortgage, and then all your investors lose their 20% down payment. So make sure you're in a first position. Okay, let's see here. All right, now the other thing too, and this is I've seen this come out, and this is actually in one of the scenarios that I'm talking about now with one of my students. Always, if there's a second mortgage, always make it terminate and make the term of the second mortgage the same amount of time as the first mortgage. If you have a 10-year first mortgage and then a 2-year second mortgage, well, man, if things aren't going well and you can't refinance, and especially if you're dealing with this is why you're dealing with an agency loan. They don't allow the second mortgages, and here's why. If you have a 2-year term on a second mortgage and you can't pay it, the guy's going to foreclose on you, and Fannie Mae is going to get a new customer. And Fannie Mae doesn't want a new customer. They underwrote you for this loan. So make sure that, if you have a second mortgage that terminates well before the first mortgage, you've got no honeymoon period. As soon as you get into that deal, all you're thinking about is, how am I going to afford to cover that second note? How am I going to refinance it? Now, in one of the cases here that I'm working on, the student says, "Hey, we got the cash. We could do this deal without the second mortgage, but he's given us some good terms, so we're going to do it." Okay, fine, that's great. But in that case, you're using your own cash to do it. In the other case that I just described, you're using the asset, the property, to do it. And if the property can't do it, you're going to fail. So don't be that guy. That's why you always hear me talk about the second mortgage that way. And then hey, this is another thing, and this is something that as a matter of fact, Brian and I have been talking quite a bit about, is always negotiate the longest tail possible, meaning a 10-year term. I mean, if the seller's going to give you seller financing, don't do a 5-year term. I mean, who knows what the economy is going to be doing in the next 5 years? Get yourself the longest tail possible. And if you have to, maybe you go with a 7-year term, but you get an option or an extension for a year, 2-year, 3-year, based upon a higher interest rate. So, negotiate, give up a little bit more in order to get the terms to be exactly the way you want it to be. So that, especially now, I've had this conversation with several students. Because of the lower rates right now, because of, I'll tell you, this economy, we're all trying to figure out what's going on, and no one knows the right answer. So in other words, if that's the case, then buy a 10-year note, buy a 10-year mortgage, give yourself as much time as possible, and survive any fluctuations that may exist. All right, and then finally, let me see. Okay, and the other thing is, this is kind of a no-brainer, but if the seller financing is behind an existing bank's first mortgage, make sure it is allowed, and make sure it is allowed as early as the LOI stage. Because if you offer a second mortgage and they accept it, and then you get a bank that says you can't have it, then you're going to go back and negotiate it with the seller. The seller is now in control of the deal, and that is not where you want to be, especially if your earnest money has gone hard and you're just finding out that the bank can't do the deal you want it to do. So make sure that you that all those things. Those are my tips, and those tips that are things that I've been talking about with some of my students on this call and on privately, as to exactly how to handle the that seller financing situation. And personally, or don't even have a set up. How do you not sign personally? Well, the thing is, I'll tell you something, Lam. What we're talking about here is signing the closing documents. So Lam asked the question, if people are making offers in their personal name or don't even have the limited liability company set up yet, how do you not sign personally? Well, the thing is, think about what documents and when you're going to sign them. The first document you're going to sign is a letter of intent. Okay, I don't have an entity set up. Fine, we'll put it in my name and say, I'm going to buy this property, or an entity that I will create at a later date is going to buy this entity. All right, fine, so they accept my offer. Then I go into a purchase and sale contract. Now, have I set up the entity yet? No, not yet. Then we say, we could actually go online and reserve a name with the Secretary of State's office in our state, or the state that you're buying the property in. Like in Massachusetts, if you reserve a name, it's $25. You reserve the name, you use that name as the name of the entity that is going to be buying the property. You put that name into the purchase and sale agreement, and now you got it covered. Now you're not signing personally. And the thing is that before you close, you will have done all of the organizational documents in order to make this a living, breathing legal entity. So, and that means that once that happens, which can happen the day before closing, then you can sign the security documents and the notes in the name of the entity, and you have not signed personally. The next day is the closing date. Everything is fine. You've totally taken care of it. So that's how you would handle that.